Hey, so today I wanted to touch on a very serious topic, and especially right now, we're between Christmas and New Year's, and for a lot of people, the holidays can be very, very difficult. And it may be because something had happened at this time of year in the past that makes it difficult to get through the holiday season. And for some people, it's just because where you're at in your life at this time, and you're not feeling it. And I know when we feel like giving up, when we just don't see a better life ahead of us, the holidays can make it even more difficult because it's joy and happiness and all these things that we are just not feeling. And because I know that when you're in that place and you don't see hope, you don't really want to hear from someone who read a book in college about suicide or about hitting rock bottom, but they've never actually been there themselves. So, someone somewhere must need to hear this because I got this nudge last night to make this video today. And to put it in perspective, until I post this all over social media, two people, two people in my life have heard this story. So, my story, it was the holidays of 2011. And my husband at the time, I had confronted him at Thanksgiving about an affair. And for anyone who's been through that, it's devastating. It's absolutely devastating to have to deal with. And I was also very isolated from the key people in my life. So I felt very, very alone. And at that time, I was deeply entrenched in the Christian religion, which, to be a good Christian, you stay and you work it out because, it's what you're supposed to do. And it's not a good idea. Looking back, knowing what I know now, having been through this enormous healing journey, you can't heal in the environment that hurts you. So, long story short on that one, it took me a few years to figure it out. But that specific Christmas, I've always loved Christmas. That was my holiday. I mean, I did it up Griswold style with lights all over the house and at least one, if not three Christmas trees. I was all about Christmas. That year I didn't even put up a tree. Not a single light. Wasn't feeling it. And again, I was very isolated from my family. And a few days before Christmas, mind you, if you've seen some of my other videos, it had been a rough journey. You know, not everyone has a kind path in life. And there's a reason for it. That's why I'm doing this video. It's not a sob story. I'm on the other end of it, and I'm reaching out for anyone who's where I was at that time. So, a few days before Christmas, at the time, my husband worked third shift. So I'm by myself in the house. I had been battling with intrusive thoughts. I didn't know at the time what I was dealing with was post narcissistic PTSD. And my brain was kicking my ass. I couldn't stand the pain. I felt like this cycle of pain in my life would never end. I didn't see an end. I didn't have hope that it would ever be different because consistently it had been this way. Repetitive cycles of pain, of betrayal, of abandonment. And I couldn't see a reason to keep going. I didn't want to just keep experiencing this over and over again in my life. And because of the betrayal, I had been forced to make some very difficult decisions. And my support system, my closest people, didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing. And because I had planned to stay and work things out, I didn't want everyone in on what was going on, what had happened. I didn't want to have to deal with the judgment from family or strained relationships. And on that codependent note, I wasn't protecting me because I wasn't the one who did anything. But y'all know. So I sat down And I wrote out what would have been labeled a suicide note. And it was actually a 4-page apology. Because having been a police officer, having been very close to a situation where someone had committed suicide, I knew the pain, the hurt that it left for the people who don't understand why you did what you did, who don't know what it's like to be up against such a huge wall of pain that you can't see past it. And to see this happen over and over again in your life and finally feel like you just can't go another day like that. So I wrote it all out, and I had a loaded handgun sitting next to me on the bed, and I was wrestling with this decision because ultimately I knew that my son had been through the same challenges with me. You know, he had had it rough, and at the end of the day, we were each other's rock. And I was struggling with leaving him with more pain. And this is hard. So, in that moment, it was, and if you're not someone who is very energy aware or has ever experienced being able to sense or see energies, this is going to sound really bizarre, but legitimately, at that moment, when I had decided that, you know what, and I just can't go on, a shadowy figure appeared in the corner of my bedroom, which, you know, kind of threw off my train of thought. I'm like, oh, what? Because it had been years. I'd been so out of touch with myself, with my intuitive gifts, with that part of me, that spiritual soul part of me. I'd tucked it away in a corner to protect it, you know, like the true me, the real me, because I didn't want it hurt anymore. I'd become so detached from my true self that I had forgotten as a child I was able to see and interact with energies. So, you know, here I am, years down the road, so completely out of touch with that, and this shadowy figure appears in my bedroom. I'm like, okay, but and there's actually some scientific research, psychological research into how this happens sometimes too, for people who are in that deep despair, that moment of complete and absolute despair. It's almost like a part of you comes outside of you to save you. Um, but in that moment, the I heard the shadowy figure saying, "This isn't the rest of your life. This isn't why this is happening. You're not being punished. You have a greater mission. That if I were to stay strong, go within and find that strength within to keep going, better things were in my future. But that as a part of my life's journey, the things that I had experienced, that path was for me to be able to help others who find themselves on that path. My role was to survive, and not just survive, but to thrive, so that I could go back and guide others through that amazingly painful journey." So no one ever knew that happened. I cleaned everything up. I'd made up my mind that I was going to keep going. Mind you, I was still in the environment that hurt me. And for those of you who are in that place where you aren't really sure if you can pull through, if you can go on, know that it's an invitation. You're not being punished. It's not because your life is just doomed to be horrible. You're being asked to become what you were meant to be. And that all of those lessons, all of those hardships and that extreme pain that you went through Getting to where you are now, it's an invitation to connect with your higher source, your higher power. Now, when I talk about God or a higher power, I don't use the term God because he and I had it out. Because of my experience with Christianity, that term for me is very charged. So you'll hear me refer to source, spirit, universe, because what happened over the next few years, as I stayed in this relationship that I was not meant to be in anymore, and looking back, I realized this. And along the lines of Christianity, I like to use the story of Moses. I look at the Bible differently now as a deeper spiritual truth than the surface story. So, to help you understand where I'm coming from on this, if you're familiar with the story of Moses in the Bible, he was asked to go to Ramesses, who was at that time the Pharaoh of Egypt, who was holding the Hebrew people as slaves, to free the Hebrew people. Now, in my analogy, we're Pharaoh, and God, higher power, source, is Moses, and we're being asked to set ourselves free. Free from all of the burdens of the past and all of the decisions we've made that have put us in a position that we're not meant to be in. We're holding ourselves captive through our old belief systems and through our victim mentality that life is happening to us, that we can't do something because someone, Ramses, has power over us. And the truth is, we're Ramses. We're the ones who are keeping ourselves limited, keeping ourselves in that bad space because we're viewing ourselves as victims. And that's how I felt at that time. I felt like my whole life I'd been victimized by everyone around me, not realizing that's what was holding me in that place. That's why this sorrow kept coming into my life, because I had been invited multiple times to stand in my power, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what that meant. We're not taught these things. The majority of us are living through generational belief systems and patterns of behavior that have been passed down from our great grandparents to our grandparents to our parents, then to us. And if we don't fix it, we then pass it down to our own children. So, anyway, I tend to get off on tangents, bear with me. And I didn't do a lot of notes for this because I just wanted to really reach out at a gut level and be like, look, I know how you feel. And here I am now on the other side of it, not just surviving, but thriving, having learned and healed through the journey to let you know that stay. We need you. You're here for a bigger purpose. And your bigger purpose is right around the corner. And it's when we stop looking at ourselves as a victim because we're feeling that way because we don't feel like we have power over our situation. And so back to the Moses analogy. So Moses goes and he asks Pharaoh to set the people free. And Pharaoh's like, no, F off, you know? And Moses is like, look, I'm telling you, if you let him go, things will be good. But if you don't, some bad stuff's going to happen. And Ramesses is like, I don't care, whatever. Who are you? Psh, get out, And all these different plagues keep coming onto Egypt until Ramesses finally is like, look, I can't take it anymore. Go, do your thing. Well, for most of us, if we look back at the situations in our lives, we were being asked then to stand in our power. We were being asked then to accept the invitation, to connect with the higher power, to connect with our higher self, our highest expression, so that we could move along our journey. But a lot of us don't like change, or we're still in that place where we're too concerned about what other people would think. We're afraid to step out of the box. We're afraid to do something different. We're afraid to be ourselves. And this is the invitation that you're being given. And with the Moses analogy, the longer you stay where you're not supposed to be, the more plagues will overcome your life until you're at the breaking point. You just can't take it anymore. This is not your tomorrow. No matter what your today looks like, if you'll accept that invitation to let go of the old, whether it's the old belief about yourself, the old beliefs that you have followed, the indoctrination of society, of religion, of your family, of your peer group, whatever that may be, that's been holding you in a place that you weren't supposed to stay in, the plague stopped. It's amazing. I stayed until 2017. So I spent 6 years of the universe kicking my ass. And I'm not even joking. It took, because again, I had been so entrenched in the Christian doctrine that you have to stay and you have to make it work. And what will other people think? And da 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 da. And most people had no knowledge that the affair had even happened. They didn't know that I had been suicidal. They didn't know all of these things that I had gone through in this process. And so the first plague obviously would have been the affair. Like, hey, this is not for you. This, you need to move on. And since I didn't listen to that one, the next one was completely uprooted, financial ruin. Um, kind of came back from that, and Spirit was like, okay, you found your strength, but in the wrong way. You're not supposed to rebuild here. Wiped out my health. I was diagnosed with a laundry list of chronic illnesses and ended up going from someone who was running 10Ks and doing extreme sports like the Spartan event and things like that to someone who was walking with a cane and being told to go on disability. Why? I still hadn't accepted the invitation. Moses kept coming back, and my internal Pharaoh kept saying no. And so another plague would come. And through this period, I was going through my spiritual awakening, and things were falling away, and new things were coming in, and there was a whole massive transition happening. And so the reason I'm sharing that is to let you know, when you accept the invitation, you're not done, unfortunately. What happens then is you kind of go into training for who you're becoming. And so if the first part of your life that led you up to the point where you don't see hope was full of pain and trauma and struggle, the next part of your life, there's a gap in the in-between where those things are brought back to you to understand so that you can heal from them and move on. And take the wisdom that you've gained in that healing process to share with others. So that's why I like to use the Moses analogy, because when we finally break down and submit to the higher power, we start the next part of the process. Things start to come around. You start to see hope and see light at the end of the tunnel. As long as you stand firm in your victim mentality. I was in mine. I'm not judging. I completely felt like I had been victimized by life in general at that point. That no matter how good I was to people, how nice I was, the beauty I tried to bring into the world, life just kept shitting on me. And it's because I was supposed to move on from where I was. And as I stood there as Ramesses going, no, F off. Who are you? More and more negative things happen in my life. So in 2017, and this was where I had finally understood that I was on my spiritual journey, that I was coming to a new version of myself. And I finally said, okay, I'll let the people go. The Moses analogy. When I finally agreed to make the changes that I knew I had been supposed to make and quit holding on to where I was and released that need to control everything. And I mean, I did it very drastically. I quietly came up with a plan to completely napalm my life and start over entirely. Um, it doesn't have to be like that. But what I want you to know is that once you accept the invitation to open to your life's journey, to guidance from the higher source, things start to turn around. There is hope. This is not the way your life is meant to be. And when we release that feeling of attack from life, of feeling that it's happening to us, and accept that invitation, we start to move forward and see, in retrospect, it's going to take time. Don't get me wrong. There's so much healing between looking back at the past and having emotional turmoil. And then in that healing process, you come to a place where you look back at the past. Trust me, one day you'll look back at the past with gratitude for who it shaped you into, because when you come out of that dark of a place and you become what you were meant to be, and you start to understand why everything happened the way it happened, you realize just how effing powerful you are. And you walk through your life feeling pretty damn bulletproof because you know that didn't take you down. You know how strong you are within. And knowing that puts you in a place of such power, of knowing that no matter what happens around you, you're not going to let yourself down ever again. You have boundaries like nobody else. You know who you are, you know what you expect, and you accept no less because you spend enough time doing that. So if you're in a bad place this holiday season or any time and you feel like giving up, we need you. We need you to stay. You have a higher purpose to serve, and the rest of your life will not look like this. Accept the invitation to become who you were meant to be. You're not a victim. You are a badass. And many people who end up in that place of feeling victimized and that the pain is too much, that they can't go on, don't think there aren't different energies at play in this world. And if something is trying that hard to hold you down, it's because they know just how powerful you really are and what a difference you're going to make in this world if you do accept the invitation to become who you're meant to be. So stay here, because one day you'll tell your story and someone else will stay because of you. It does get better. There is hope. Please accept the invitation. You're not a victim. You're a badass who's been led to believe that you're something less. Get back in your power. Get back to who you are. Who you are. Not who you were told you were, not who other people wanted you to be. That deep essence of who you are. Because that is your gift to the world. And apparently it's going to be pretty damn powerful because something doesn't want it to be. Which, I don't know, when I looked at it like that, it kind of kicked in that inner rebel, like, yeah? Oh, you're going to hold me down. Whatever it takes, whatever mindset you need to get into to decide to stay. Seek out whatever help you need. Get someone, something to cling to, something to drive you, something that makes you want to stay, and hold that thing. If it's a person, keep their picture with you. I carried, because of the intrusive thoughts that I was dealing with at the time, I actually carried a 3 by 5 card with statements that countered the intrusive thoughts. So that when the dark thoughts started to come in, I'd pull out this 3 by 5 card and I would read off the opposing truths to the negative lies that were coming into my head at that time. And it's counteracting. We have it within us to absolutely change the way that we think, get our brain under control, to rewire our brain to positivity. So, I mean, through this process, I actually was able to overcome the PTSD. And that is kind of what led into the whole spiritual awakening. But I know someone, somewhere, needed to hear this today because it kept me up last night to make this video today. Whoever you are, wherever you are loved, and we need you to stay. So just know that there's better ahead. I hope this helps. Love and light.